At some point, she started to pull away from me. I noticed that we weren't as close as we used to be and that our relationship had changed. She dropped a few hints here and there, but I didn't pick up on them. I did some digging and found out that she'd been having an emotional affair. She started complaining to me, but I didn't listen. Over the years, she'd been complaining and teasing me about our marriage. Now, with this new evidence, I not only heard her, I listened. She was unhappy with our marriage and had fallen out of love with me. It was clear to me that if I tried to bring up the fact that she was wrong and that we could fix our love, that I loved her and that we could restore it, she'd have just distanced herself from me even more. If I tried to talk to her about it, she'd have just distanced herself from me even more. She just looked at me and I saw another bridge between us crumbling. With all this on my mind, I finished my beer and replayed our last argument over and over again. I was trying to find a way to win her back. After all, she was mine. It seemed like every time I tried harder to get my wife back, she drifted even further away from me. I sat up late at night, allowing my wife to sleep in our big family bed while I nursed my wounded feelings. Along the way, my mind kicked in and a new way of thinking emerged. I suddenly realized why I'd argued with her about what she was feeling. I'd been ignoring her for so long that I'd forgotten what she'd been telling me. She was sharing her feelings with me, and here I was arguing with her, telling her she was wrong. I realized that I wasn't really feeling those feelings. It was a silly argument. How can you tell someone they are wrong about their feelings? Well, it stopped right then. She felt what she felt, so why argue about it? What was I feeling? Strange. Actually, it was strange because I was sitting in the darkness on the couch, thinking. I realized that I was unhappy in my recent relationship with my wife. I wasn't sure that I loved her anymore. I was in love with the idea of still being together and being married to my loving wife, but that wasn't reality. This moment of realization shook me. It took me some time to put everything together. But now I had a plan of action. Whether it worked or not at that moment I didn't care because I now knew that what I was doing and what she was doing wasn't working. What does this mean? The definition of insanity is trying the same thing that didn't work over and over again, thinking it will work this time. I smiled. I threw my beer bottles into the trash bin and decided to sleep in the guest bedroom. Frank and Linda opened the door to the guest bedroom and flicked on the light switch, depriving me of sleep. Why are you sleeping in the guest room? I squinted against the light until my eyes adjusted. I stayed up late because I didn't want to disturb you. I said I didn't want to disturb you, and she looked at me, then shuffled off to the kitchen for some coffee. I don't drink coffee, as I'm blessed with the ability to wake up and be alert immediately. I jumped into the shower and prepared for the confrontation. My step was springy. Linda sat across from me in the living room. I was sitting on the sofa, as usual. Linda was frowning and looked pretty upset. She was about to say something. Frank, she began. This isn't working. I feel disappointed and lost, and I don't think I love you anymore. I sat there, looking at her. She paused, then continued. Frank, I know we've been together for a long time, but I think we need to get a divorce. The word hung in the air. I smiled as she nervously looked at me. Sounds good, I said. I agree, but do you understand? Now she was confused. I stood up and approached her. I knelt down in front of her. Linda, I can't change how you feel. You don't love me. How can I argue against that? Can I tell you that you are wrong? No, you don't love me. Well, to be honest, there were times in our life when I didn't love you either. If you feel that way, can't live with me again, how can I argue with that? Linda looked at me as if I were insane, but deep down I saw that she was right. I understood what she said was true, and she appreciated it. Wait, you said you didn't love me? She asked. There were times just like for you. She was a bit shaken all the time. She'd played this little scene in her head, but she never expected that I would react this way. I liked seeing how her emotions were reflected on her face. Well, I said, anything else I need to leave tonight, so I would like to settle this now. If you don't mind, are you leaving right now? I stood up and started to put my jacket on, getting ready to leave. Frank, where are you going? I'm leaving. I think I'll go to a few bars. I might start looking for someone else instead of you right now. I got myself a bourbon and sat at one of the tables away from the crowd. I took out my mobile phone and started working on another part of my plan. I called a colleague, Jessica, who worked with me in my department and was known as the company gossip. I told her what had happened, playing the role of the poor abandoned husband. I had a chat with my wife, particularly about her request for a divorce. I called her and not Jessica because I was in the bar, feeling sorry for myself and might not show up for work the next day. I could hear the wheels turning in her head, as Jessica and I flirted with her at work and she was single. The next thing I remember is that Jessica invited herself out with me for the evening, saying she wanted to look after me and be my friend while I was in a vulnerable emotional state. I met Jessica at a bar that I knew my wife and her friends often went to. Was I worried that someone might see me? My marriage was apparently over. My wife didn't love me, and frankly, I didn't love Linda at the moment either. Jessica looked good. She arrived quickly, dressed attractively and seductively, perhaps hoping to reach me before someone else had a chance. At least, that's what I think. I like to think that's what happened, but when she saw me, she was a bit surprised that my body language and mood didn't match the news I told her over the phone. My smile didn't help either. "Frank, what's going on?" she asked, sitting next to me with a puzzled expression. I raised my hand and pointed to my ring finger was now bare. "She wants a divorce. That's how she feels. Why should I fight it?" I called the waiter over and ordered another drink. Jessica ordered her usual Cosmo. Frank, over the phone, said, "You seemed more upset." I finally realized that maybe I don't love her like I used to, I said. "She wants a divorce." "I know. I'm not going to fight it. She wants to leave." "Fine. I'm not going to lie around, forgotten and unloved." Jessica took a big sip of her cocktail. She sat and looked at me. I realized that I was having an effect on this woman. Whatever my attitude, I noticed it was confusing. "Maybe we should dance?" I didn't wait for her response. I just grabbed her hand and led her to the dance floor. "What are you planning to do?" I held her closer to me. "I'm going to give her everything she thinks she wants. I'm going to do whatever I want right now. I want to dance with you. In fact, I've wanted to for a long time. I've wanted to dance with you for a long time." She looked into my eyes and smiled. "If you're trying to get back at her," I raised an eyebrow. Maybe she pressed her whole body against me, feeling comfortable and warm. "I'm okay with that." She sighed. We lost track of time. It was nice not to worry about having to call. I went home to tell Linda when I would be back. Jessica was fun, intelligent, and we flirted all evening. She was completely mine. She knew it, I knew it, but I didn't take her home with me. It was really nice to know that someone wanted me. My wife had bruised my ego, but Jessica had bolstered it. Moreover, I would say that Jessica was more attractive than Linda. We kissed in the car park by her car. I opened the door for her and smiled. "See you tomorrow at work." She nodded. I made it clear that I just needed some fun right now, and I wasn't about to commit to another woman. I was now. I'm looking for someone for myself. I'm sure that by the end of work tomorrow, all the women in the company will know about it. I should tell you that I am a calm man, but I was looking forward to telling Linda what I'd been up to. When I got home, Linda was... I went to bed, but as soon as she heard me come in, she got up to meet me. I put away my coat in the closet and started to undress for bed. I went out and said, "I told you I was leaving. Why should you care?" "Frank, I know how you feel. I'm okay with it. You want a divorce? I'll gladly give you one. I'm not the one who wants to force you to live with someone you no longer love." I took my pillow and clothes for the next morning and headed to the guest room. "Frank," Linda called out hesitantly. I stopped shifting my things to the other hand. When she looked down, she couldn't. "I don't understand. I mean, you don't have to sleep in another bed. Are you suggesting that you will sleep in another bed and move out of our bedroom?" I didn't want to make it easy for her. She gasped and wiped away a tear. "I didn't mean that. I mean you can share the bed with me. That is if you want to. If you don't want to, I guess I could move to another room." She was nervous about actually moving out of her bedroom, something she hadn't anticipated. She held her breath in fear that I would make her do just that. I spared her the agony. "This bed is more comfortable. I'll stay here. With you if it's not too much trouble." Her face brightened. "Oh yes, that would be wonderful. I mean, it's no problem for me." "Then it's settled," I said and tossed the pillow back onto the bed. She wanted to talk, but I was too tired and told her to go to bed. We would have time to talk later. Indeed, by the next evening, 3 women at work had made advances towards me. I even had a friend give me his sister's number. She was a widow and had been struggling to find someone to date. I arranged dates for the upcoming week with all 4 women, including another one with Jessica. I intentionally kept this evening free because I needed to talk with Linda. We needed to sort everything out. I suppose she needed to live her own life. I returned home and faced Linda. "Carol saw you last night at the bar. She said you were with a woman. Who was she? What were you doing together?" "Carol said the 2 of you. They seemed really comfortable with each other." I could have lost my cool with her. I could have yelled at her, called her an easy woman for hanging out with men, neglecting me, drifting away from me. But I didn't. I smiled and told her I would answer her questions after I changed. She tried to challenge me, but I ignored her and went to change into my home clothes once I was comfortable. I noticed that Linda was staring at me intently. She was ready for a fight. Her eyes were close to tears, but her body was tense with anger. It was just from work. I told her I didn't deny it. I'm sure she thought I would start. I tried to make excuses, but I didn't have a good reason. She asked accusingly, "What were you doing together?" I looked at her and said, "We were on a date." She shrieked, "I don't believe you." I nodded and continued to sit calmly. She said, "You have no right. We are married. What makes you think you can do that?" I stood up and got a drink from the kitchen and sat down again. She was still standing, staring at me intently, waiting for my response. "Why should it bother you?" I asked. She stared at me. The Gabe. "We are married," she said. "But you want a divorced woman, don't you?" She nodded, unsure of her voice. "You said you don't, right?" I said I'm not in love with you. She corrected me and I agreed with you, Linda. You're no longer in love with me. So why shouldn't I go and look for love with someone else? You want a divorce, you don't love me. So what reason do I have to stay here with you? She sat down, actually slumped into her chair. What will people say? Don't you realize? What that looks like now is that Carol is spreading rumors all over town about my husband dating some woman. Don't you dare call Jessica a woman. I growled. She was a perfect lady and I was a gentleman last night. She went on a date with a married man. I call that a promiscuous woman. So I said angrily, standing up. She was pacing up and down in front of me. She wasn't married, and if she was a promiscuous woman, what would you call a married woman who knowingly dates other men without her husband's knowledge? Linda stared at me, speechless. I could see her thoughts working. How much does he know? She panicked. What does he know? That has nothing to do with me, she said angrily. I just looked at her, and time seemed to stretch endlessly. I remained silent, and she saw it in my face. I knew her body began to shake. How much do you know? I shouted. Whether you slept with them or not, I really don't care. You see, my dear, this marriage was over when you decided to count me out. I'm not going to cry about it. I'm moving on. I'm going to take care of myself. I don't get any support from my wife at home. I got up and went to the kitchen. Dinner wasn't ready. I decided to make something for myself. She could cook for herself a little later. She entered. I finished my dinner and watched as she did the same in the kitchen. She said, "I'm sorry," and I replied, "Me too." I put away the dishes and turned to her. "I have plans for the rest of the week," I said. "I won't be home early if you prefer." She didn't respond, so I went upstairs to bed. I decided to sleep in the guest room. I'm sure Linda had a restless night. I met Christina after work. She was a sweet blonde about 35, divorced with 2 children. We chatted over coffee and then did something really silly. I took her to play laser tag. It's a team game using safe lasers. We used guns and sensors to record hits. It was us 2 adults against 10 teenagers who kept annihilating us at the start of each game. Christina enjoyed it. I liked sitting and talking with her after we were killed, waiting for the next game to start. At one point during the last game, we were both killed and fell side by side, pretending to be dead. I pulled her towards me while we were lying there and kissed her. She kissed me back. We had a nice dinner, and then I walked her back to her house, where we kissed goodbye. She said farewell to me before things went beyond. We kissed, and she asked me to ask her out again soon. I was bracing myself for another confrontation with Linda when I returned, but she seemed subdued. She said hello and smiled as I undressed after the date. She told me she'd had a good time, and her emotions were concealed. You're right. Thanks for noticing. How was your evening? We talked for the first time in months. We sat down and talked until late at night. I listened to her, and she listened to me. I've never had sex with anyone else, Frank. I swear to you. She confessed that she'd kissed a few men and shared her thoughts with them. I had feelings for Justin at work. He wanted more from me, but I wasn't ready. Linda, I'm sure we are both to blame for this, but even though you didn't actually have sex with anyone else, you still betrayed me. We were teenagers. I'm glad that you refrained from cheating on me before asking for a divorce. I respect you for that. I should have listened to your feelings instead of arguing with them. She agreed, and we sat in silence for a while. Frank, I'm confused right now. I don't know if I want a divorce. I smiled and said, let me know when you figure it out. I'm not kicking you out of the house, and I'm not planning to. Frank, I was already up and about to go to bed. Are you still going to see Jessica? Yes, I'm currently seeing her and others too. Do what you want to do, figure things out. I need to do what's best for me. If we end up getting a divorce, well then it wasn't meant to be. I headed to the guest bedroom. She followed me and stopped in the doorway. Frank, I turned to see her as I was taking off my shirt. Come back to bed, please. I hesitated. Do you think that's wise? Tears streamed down her face. I don't know. I just want you right now. I reached out to her, and she threw herself into my arms. She threw her arms around me and sobbed. She was confused. She didn't know what to feel. I carried her back to our bed. I held her as we fell asleep. Lauren was a good friend of mine. She was a fan, and we always talked about the latest TV shows and fandom stuff. We were at a nice bar with live music. She was eager to go to it, but none of her friends or dates were interested that evening, so I took her with me. It was fun, but we hadn't really connected as romantic partners. We had flirted at work, but there was no chemistry. We had a good time, but we were just friends. That was enough for both of us, and I got home early. I pulled up to the house and found a car parked in the driveway. My jealousy briefly reared its ugly head, but I calmed down and reminded myself that whatever happens, happens. There's no point in worrying. I learned this from my psychiatrist while being treated for my fear of flying. I was panicking and thinking, oh my God, I'm about to get on a plane. He made me shift to an excited and anticipatory tone. Oh my God, I'm about to get on a plane. I can't wait. It took some practice, but it generally worked in the short term. I didn't know what to expect, so I repeated my mantra and opened the door to see. Linda was chatting with Carol, one of her friends. Frank, I didn't expect you to be back so early. Linda, I nodded at them. Carol shot me daggers with her eyes and said nothing. The work finished early, so here I am. Do you need some privacy? Linda and Carol exchanged glances. Then Carol rose from the I should be going, Linda. I'll talk to you soon. Linda walked Carol to the door. Carol gave me a disdainful look and left without saying anything to me. Sorry for intruding. I didn't mean to interrupt your evening. I said to her, don't be silly. This is your home too. Home is a strong word. When was the last time she or I've been calling this place home? Have you eaten? She asked. There were leftovers from what she and Carol had apparently shared. I poked at the food while she busied herself cleaning up the kitchen. How are you? I asked. She sat down. I'm okay. I think I invited Carol over to talk, but she only confused me more. So how did she want me to handle it? Kick you out, change the locks, and divorce you? Well, my key still works, so I guess you didn't have time to call the locksmith. She laughed. Don't be silly. I had to explain to her that I was the one who asked for the divorce after I told you. What rights do I have over you? No, I left you. She looked at me intently, and that last part was a question. She wanted an answer, and I wanted to jump up and tell her that I still belonged to her. But I didn't. I said nothing in the past that would have reassured her, and my assurances would have pushed her away. Maybe this new non. I changed the subject because I didn't want to get into it. I'm afraid I have some bad news. My date for tomorrow might be canceled. I'm stuck with concert tickets. Maybe you'd like to go with me instead of another girl. Her face brightened. I'd love to go. If you want, I could give these tickets to someone at work. I'd be happy to go with you, she said, smiling. I'd love to, I replied. Are you sure? She asked. Yes, I replied, smiling. This could be fun, I said. I told her the news. Heather was a bit annoyed, but that's just how it goes in the dating game. Linda was ready to go when I picked her up after work. She looked good, and she was dressed to impress. I was pretty sure she was dressing that way to impress me. I didn't know much about this band, but Heather had suggested we go to this concert, so I bought the tickets. They were good, loud, but good. I wasn't surprised when we ran into Heather. Linda was surprised by how good Heather looked, and she quickly realized that Heather would have been my date tonight. I apologized to Heather, and I met Linda. Heather. Linda was supposed to be my date tonight, but something came up. When I introduced Linda, I always called her my wife. This time, I decided not to, and Linda noticed right away. It's so nice to meet you, she said. I'm Mrs. Donaldson. She looked Heather directly in the eyes, and something passed between the two women. Heather was smart enough to apologize and said she'd see me at work the next day. Linda was angry. She grabbed my hand. Where's your wedding ring? She asked. I'm sorry, I said. I took it off after you. Linda was at a loss for words when I asked for a divorce. Frank, we aren't divorced yet. I smiled and focused on the music several times. I went to the bar to refill our glasses each time. Linda watched me like a hawk. Every time I was at the bar, some woman would approach me and we'd chat. I made one laugh, and she even gave me her number. Linda saw all this, but said nothing. I'm not a ladies' man. I can flirt a bit, but I've always been respectful and never pushy. Linda asked for a divorce, so I decided to move on. I realized I had a rather blunt approach to flirting, so now that I was free of restraint, I found I didn't need to hold back. I wasn't the handsomest guy around, but I always had the ability to be witty, and I found that women seemed to appreciate my humor and frankness for the first time in a long while. Linda saw me in action, and I think it surprised her, but she must have realized that the same tricks and flirts had once captivated her heart. Tonight, I think she remembered just that. She was silent all the way home. On the way home, I was quiet too. Once we got home, we started getting ready for bed. Frank, where's your wedding ring? I pointed to the sock drawer in the dresser. She walked over and opened it, reaching in and grabbed the gold ring and pulled it out. She looked at it, then at me. The weight of it. The ring was a symbol of her, and her eyes filled with tears. I told her that I thought she should throw it away or sell it. She looked at me and asked what she should do with it. I told her that she could do whatever she wanted. The ring is a symbol of our love for each other and our marriage. Was it a shield, a warning that its wearer was unavailable to others? I doubt most people appreciate and recognize what this symbol means. I know that for me this ring helped fend off other women. I hope your ring would do the same for you. Ever since you decided not to live with me anymore, I think I no longer need this symbol to protect me. It only reminds me of what used to be. I looked her straight in the eyes until she met my gaze. When the time comes, you'll decide what to do with this ring. I approached her and closed her fingers around the gold band. She watched me and took responsibility. Frank, I was just falling asleep when she called out to me. Thanks for the evening. I enjoyed the concert and spending time with you. Anytime I drifted back to sleep in the morning, breakfast awaited me. Linda had made eggs and bacon. She was an excellent cook and I appreciated her efforts. I noticed that Linda hadn't taken off her wedding and engagement rings. I also saw her fidgeting with them as she ate with me that morning. Carol called me at work. Carol, I'm surprised to hear from you. What can I do for you? Lunch today at 12. At 30 at Bohemia. She hung up and I stared at the dead handset. I wasn't sure what to expect at lunch. I didn't know Carol very well. Linda had befriended her at work. She looked pleasant, but she had never been very friendly towards me. She was one of Linda's friends, and they often talked together. I entered the bar where Jessica had already arrived when I got there. She was sitting at a table covered with a white linen tablecloth, and she waved at me. Her face was tense and stern, so I knew this conversation was going to be unpleasant. As soon as I sat down and my order was taken, Carol fixed me with a glare. What on earth are you up to? Linda and I felt a rush of embarrassment and anger. I was dating other women right in front of her for the first time. I blushed, partly because I was embarrassed and partly because I was angry. I quickly shut my mouth before I could say something I would regret. I realized immediately that anything I said or did at this lunch would be reported straight. Back to Linda. She watched me as I regained my composure. I spent a long time thinking about how to respond. Finally, I began to speak. Carol, how much do you really know about what's going on with Linda? I know her husband is acting like a complete idiot. Carol, stop. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things here. If you're not hiding anything, I'll answer your question. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things here. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things here. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things here. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things here. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things here. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things here. Amin took a sip of water. Linda has had her weak moments. Frank, I bet I said sarcastically. We've been trying to help her figure things out. Carol replied, You see, my dear Carol, this is where I take exception. Why are you and your friends taking it upon yourselves to help her sort out her marriage? Carol was silent. Really? What? It's none of your business, but I thought I should tell you that I think I should be her best friend, her partner, her life companion. Don't you think that if she had any problems, she should have talked to me first? Don't you think she should have come to me to sort things out instead of going to her friends, who are apparently so good at? They're responsible people who take her to places where she can sort out her feelings with other men. Men who apparently don't care that they're kissing another man's wife. Carol went pale. She turned very pale. It seemed like she suddenly lost her appetite somehow. Carol had unleashed my anger. She was just another foolish so. I have a friend who likes to get involved in other people's relationships. Carol, I have to ask you something. Are you married? In someone else's marriage, she gasped. But I'm her friend, not her counselor. How many times have you talked to me? Once or twice, as far as I remember. I've been married to Linda for 15 years, but when have you ever taken the time to meet, talk, and get to know the man and partner of your friend? I've been in her life for 15 years, so I know her like the back of my hand. You don't know anyone else like you know Linda. You're giving her advice and trying to help her get through this. But what do you really know about me? I could tell Carol was about to cry. I'd reached her as best I could to get her message to Linda and Carol. Carol told me how she felt and that she wanted a divorce. And I quote, "I don't love you anymore." Well, Carol, tell me how I'm supposed to respond to that. What argument can I make to say she's wrong? Well, she wanted the divorce, so why should I be unhappy, hoping she'll change her mind? I finished my drink, and my food was half-eaten, but I was done. I stood up and gave Carol one last look. I found that other women see something in me. My wife and I are no longer together. She pushed me away, but I didn't push her away. I'm not going to put my life on hold because my partner is confused and no longer wants me. I'm trying to move on. How she feels about that is her own affair. I'm no longer trying to convince her or tell her what she should feel. I can accept that with that final statement. I left before Carol. I could say anything else, but I knew that as soon as I left the restaurant, she would be on the phone with Linda. I had something to think about that evening. I was going to meet Janet, and things went very well. She was different from the others. She was a younger black woman, very beautiful and very attractive. We were very polite and formal when she first joined our company. I joined the company a few months later, and there was a moment when I was telling a rather spicy joke to some guys. Just as I reached the punchline, Janet walked into the room behind me. The men around me noticed her, and they held their breath as I turned to see her shocked face. I flashed her a rather mischievous smile and said, "Admit it, that's really funny." She stood there. She looked at me with a mix of shock and amusement, then burst out laughing along with me. From that moment on, she was one of the guys. But by the end of my date with her, she was all woman. Janet let me go further than I had on other dates. At the very last moment, I was the one who declined her offer to stay the night. I really wanted to, but there were issues with Linda that needed to be resolved first. "Frank," Linda asked as I settled into bed. "Frank, I need you to take a shower. It's dark. The light's off, but I can hear you. Please, Frank, if you don't take a shower, I'll have to ask you to go sleep in the guest room." I was confused. What's happening? I turned on the bedside lamp and saw my wife. Her face was red and her eyes were she was really moist. She couldn't look me in the eyes. "Please, Frank, you can come back to our bed, but I'm asking you to please take a shower." "What's wrong? I always shower in the mornings, honey. You know that." She turned away from me. She turned her entire body away. "You smell like her." Oh, I smelled like Janet. Yes, I got out of bed. I felt awful. I looked at her. She was still turned away from me. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "Listen, if you want me to go to the guest room, I'll go. I can do that, no problem." She sobbed. "I want you to come back to our bed. I just want to say that I can't stand the smell of someone else on you. I just can't. I'm sorry. I want you in our bed. It's bad enough knowing that you're seeing others. I can pretend you're out with the guys. I can ignore my friends telling me who they've seen you with. I could even meet someone like that girl Heather and tell myself you're just friends, but now I know I can. I can tell you smell her on you. I want you to come back to our bed, but only after you take a shower. I can't stand her scent on you." I walked over to her side of the bed. I didn't linger. I leaned down and hissed her forehead. "I'm sorry. I was inconsiderate. Let me take a shower and I'll come back to our bed the next morning." It was Saturday, and I slept in. I had been a long week for me. I went out every night. I felt my age. I hoped I wouldn't come. Linda woke me up with breakfast and asked what my plans were for the weekend. I told her I didn't have anything planned. She reached into her pocket and pulled something out. She came over to me and knelt down in front of me. She opened her hand and showed me my wedding ring. She looked up at me and said, "Frank, I want to work on our marriage." I think I didn't think everything through. She carefully started sliding the ring onto my finger. I let her. "I still love you." She remained kneeling, waiting for me to say something. Finally, I spoke. "Do you really feel that way?" She nodded. "No divorce." She nodded vigorously. "What about other men?" "There's no one else but you." It was now the most delicate part. "You might think I'm crazy for this, but I went ahead anyway. You need to understand that I will still occasionally see other women." Linda swallowed. We sat like that for a long time, our eyes meeting throughout this process. I learned something about my wife. I was confident about the outcome. Finally, she nodded. "I suppose I shouldn't be surprised." She said, "I think I'm in love with you too." I told her. I grabbed her and kissed her. I kissed her passionately. She kissed me back. I treated her well, but not entirely so. Over the years, we had drifted apart. My biggest mistake was not acknowledging her feelings every time she shared them. I argued with her, and I know that's not helpful. It's arrogant to tell someone that what they feel isn't true. It just builds resentment. Over time, she became hostile towards me. I guess I pushed her to the point where she no longer valued what she had. Maybe it's my fault, but we changed. She changed, but I never change. So why would I want to go back to the way I was before? I took a guess that she wanted me to go back, but we both had changed. Now she knew that there were others behind the scenes. She said that she wanted to be replaced if she decided to go her own way. I asked her if she was planning to see other men. She said that she wasn't planning to see other men. I smiled and said that I would do that from time to time. She smiled and said that she remembered that I was her husband. I told her that I wouldn't forget about her. She smiled and said that she wanted to be taken to bed and shown what I could do. I've been missing out on a lot. Show me what all these other girls got from you. Do you think you have what I need? I asked. I'll just show you my love, and maybe wear you out so much that you won't have energy for any other woman. I picked her up and carried her to the bedroom. I set her down on the bed, and we both removed our clothes with a sense of urgency. We were both really into it. We had sex a few times, and then she had sex with me again. She realized that I hadn't slept with any of the other women after 15 years. My wife knows what I can do in bed for the rest of the day. She smiled, and I didn't ask her what happened on my dates. I didn't bring it up, and she didn't either. It was something we left in the past. From then on, I stopped asking her about the men she'd kissed and talked to. My wife now looks at me with a certain degree of respect and admiration. I never thought my plan would work. It wasn't a very good plan at first. I was too stubborn to let her get the satisfaction of seeing her husband destroyed by her hurtful words and request for a divorce. I saw how she reacted and accepted that I was seeing other women while she stayed at home waiting for me. I pushed my plan further and won her back by distancing myself from her. You don't miss something until you have it. You want what you don't have. That's my new mantra. By freeing both her and myself, we're now more together than before. I'm still seeing others, but not yet anyone Linda knows. The first sign that Linda is reverting to her old self will lead to my next date. She knows this, and together we work to not just listen to each other but to truly hear.